Okay, in the spirit of complicated, interesting forms, let's try a tree. So one way that we could build a tree would be off of a cylinder. And the top shape of the tree off of a sphere, although that's a pretty boring tree, right? So one of the things that you might look for is a way to complicate the base of the tree. So if we took the cylinder that the base of the tree is being built on and we added a little bit of gesture to it, we'll just add a little bit of squash and stretch. So we're going to squash this side and stretch this side. And then if we take the top of the tree and along with the cylinder, like if we move the cylinder shape into something that might be triangular or triangular and squared, and then we start to end up in shapes that are a little bit more compelling. Now, what I like to do is I like to take a cylinder like this, and I like to bend it in these kinds of ways. And then I like to take another cylinder behind it on the ground like that, and I like to bend that one around, because I think that the trunks of trees they have this swirling, spiraling kind of feeling to me. You can add a few, and it's like these various currents in the tree finding their way into the overall shape, and I think that that's very beautiful. And then as you come down into the ground, then you can start to see how the roots would, and you see this cross contour line? It tells me that the root there has dimension, and it gives the tree a reason to have these cracks and crevices. And as I move up into the branch system, then the branches become a continuation of these movements. So this branch from here would want to continue its swirl and move from there up and through and out. And so I'm going to take a branch and move it off. And the branch is also a moving cylinder, stretching and extending the concepts that we started with. So here was a cylinder that I wrapped here. And so now I'm going to take that one and bring it up and out into the overall shape of the tree. And there was be one in the back, and I'm moving upwards. Okay. And this starts to become a much, much more interesting trunk shape. And as we go to shade the trunk, the shading involves the concepts of cylinder. We have a light side and a dark side, and at the edge, it darkens, and then as you move into the light, you move into the light in a very gradual way. So it involves that, but imagine that you had that and another cylinder right here, and say you were seeing either cast shadows of cylinders, or this cylinder, its dark section is right here. We could stretch its dark section to right there, and have its reflected light section right there. These are the, okay? So now let's take this cylinder, and I'm going to separate, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the darks of it from the light, okay? And if the light source is coming from that direction, we could anticipate where the cast shadow of all of this stuff would be. Like here would be a cast shadow for this, and the cast shadow for the tree in general is going to be moving off in this direction. It's going to be coming out this way. And every branch ends up having the same shading situation that we've been working with. And it's the carrying of this situation into a multiplicity of forms that starts to make our drawings like really lively and exciting. So this would be a cylinder that's gently turning here. Okay, so that starts us with shading a trunk. And then what we would want to do is, you want to go in and darken on the shadow edge again, just like always. I'm told that some people feel like outside the reflected light is not as strong. I don't know about that. So this becomes a really fun shape to play with. And here's my cast shadow. And then this could be my shadow accent right there, moving along the ground. And then here's the cast shadow of the tree in general. So this branch falls in the cast shadow. There's the cast shadow of the tree in general. Okay, and then the next cool thing that we have to think about here is that as we move over into the light, so this area here, naturally, our eyes are drawn to the light because the light is, that's where we get information. The shadow shapes the light, but then our main information comes from being able to look directly into something and see what is it. And so as we're transitioning here, we transition but take into account the texture of the tree. So the tree bark has this kind of little shadow side on each piece of bark and a little light side on each piece of bark. And it happens primarily at this transition. You can use this texture as a means of transitioning over to the light. And sometimes the very, very lightest part, like in photography, sometimes the very lightest part is blown out, and that's not an ideal situation for texture. So I'm doing the texture right there, like how I told you. And I'm going to leave the foliage for another lesson. So this lesson is turning into a lesson on tree trunks, which is a worthwhile lesson, I think. Okay, so we have a little tree trunk with some texture. I agree, perhaps my reflected light is a little strong. I want to push it back a little bit. Something that's really nice to do when you have when you're drawing anything, but like, you know, it's really nice to do something moving in and out of a cast shadow. So for instance, on an earlier lesson, we drew a rock, but if I took a rock and I put it there, like this, like coming into the shadow here, say this root is going underneath this rock, and now the shadow is falling across this rock, And so I can draw that into cast shadow right there. This side would be form shadow up to here. And there could be a shadow accent through there. And it's really nice to see rocks with little bits of light, like little dappled bits of light hitting them. And you can just go ahead and start stacking up trees and rocks and kind of constructing landscapes. So this one, the base of it is disappearing over the other side of a mountain. And so no problem. Considering I'm going to take 3 cylinders. I would like to take 3 cylinders and draw them into that. However, in this instance, because this one, I want to say push this one into the background, so I'm going to use less detail on this one. What I want to do, I'm going to separate it dark from light over here. So that's my separation of dark from light. And then I'm going to lightly tone in that separation. And if I leave it lighter, the shading on it, if I leave it lighter than what's happening in the foreground, it will have a tendency to read as background. So this is a really nice way to, I'm going to darken it just a little bit more because I want that rock to have some presence. And then this transition would be gentle. Okay. I'm not the greatest fan of that last branch that I just added. In fact, I'm going to take it out. The space that was in between was a lot nicer before I added that. This kind of little triangle-y shape, I would take a little bit of time and emphasize that shape. I might be being overly playful there. Put the cast shadow of the tree, not just on the rock, but on that other tree. And now look at the cast shadow has this sort of dancing presence along the ground, like it's going, oh, I'm coming over here, I'm coming up here, and I'm going down over there. It's having some fun, or I'm having some fun. Okay, guys, tree video.